Hello, 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 hello.
Hello.
Let's do a check of the old. Let's see if we got everything working on the chat. Chat. Oh, we got Bubba right off the bat. Nice. Okay, so we are here, and Billy is having camera issues. So we have this cute little cartoon of Billy. Up there. I mean, not cartoon picture. It's a caricature, so to speak. He's very handsome in that cartoon, I think. What do you think, Bubba? I guess
Yeah,
we'll
because
wait for
all I
Bubba.
see is little green. What's it called? The green
Yeah, you're not.
Discord thing.
You'd have to turn on the actual YouTube or Twitch or Facebook stream. But I did post these pictures in our group today.
Uh-huh.
It's like a little cartoon version of us. So,
Oh,
you
I
know.
didn't see that. I saw something else, but I didn't see that. Interesting.
So yeah. All right, so we are. I guess we can jump right in. Anything that you want to, anything on your mind before we get started? It's been a couple weeks. Maybe we should give a little rundown.
Did you
on
see O'Neal Cruz's home run?
I did not. We talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates now? Is that what's going?
122.9 miles per hour.
Off the bat?
Hardest hit.
Huh.
Yeah, hardest hit ball in StatCast history.
Interesting.
Breaking his own record.
So you got a slugger out there that you're just really happy about.
He's Ellie De La Cruz, but a pirate.
Yeah, okay. So, but De La Cruz is not he's not that guy. He's a very exciting player, but he's not Mr. Home Run guy.
Well, Cruz is all of the things De La Cruz is, plus the ability to home runs.
Yeah. Bubba says it's a pretty good rendition of you. It's AI. Ed actually made this for us. So it is an AI rendition of Billy.
Really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's real quickly. I'm going to just point with my little pointer finger here and talk about what we've been talking about with Rhett and McLaughlin of Good Mythical Morning, and at one point was of Campus Crusade. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion about that kind of stuff. Your involvement with some friends, I suppose, that you were involved with, I guess.
Yeah.
You had
I knew folks in college that were very involved in that.
Yeah, you had some opinions about it that we heard. We listened to him talk about that. We listened to him talk about. I think this was an interesting part of the discussion when I was re-listening to it today about how certain Christians have like a certainty about it, right? About their faith, their belief set, and how Rhett was really happy that he had picked the right one, right? And he was very prideful about that.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that kind of, I guess, attitude, and how interesting it is, just because I think we mentioned there's something like 40,000 different denominations in the Christian faith. And
yeah, I'm curious where that comes from. I've never heard.
I think that was a Chat GPT pull up. maybe somebody in chat can hook us up with a more exact number. That seems like a lot, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
40,000
Christian denominations and
denomination. Like, I mean, it might be from the perspective of, like, you're of a big denomination, right? But within that denomination, there's a ton of subsets, right? So how many subsets are in the Methodist Church?
Well, I'm in the United Methodist Church, so
I said Methodist, right? So, like, United is below probably
Methodism. Of Methodism, we're the largest of the Methodist denominations. But yeah, there's probably, just off the top of my head, I can come up with maybe 10 to 15 that I know of. If you count CME, AME, Zion, AME,
Yeah.
the Global Methodist, there's British Methodist, Mexican Methodist. Not all of the ones around the world are connected to United Methodist Church.
Sure.
So
But
I could probably come up with 10 pretty quickly. But
you come up with 10 pretty quickly.
and then Baptists, they're going to have a huge variety.
Yeah, and it feels like as time goes with this, people want to differentiate their little group somehow. So all of a sudden, new denomination-ish kind of thing. It's a new church, but maybe it's a new denomination too.
And are they counting like Faith Promise, which has its own, way of looking at the world? And
so here, I'm just gonna pull it up on the Copilot real quick. How many?
I don't know. That just seems like a large number.
Christian.
Because AI is never wrong.
Well, listen, it's pretty good, but it is wrong, certainly. I had a discussion with it the other day, and it thought that Joe Biden was the 2024 presidential nominee. And I was like, how did you make that mistake? And it was like, it was very funny.
I'm sure it was.
All right, this is just Copilot. 45,000 as of 2024, and its site's christianwebsite.com, I guess. I mean, this is worldwide, so 45,000 according to that. But who knows?
And what are they citing?
They were citing some website, so like, you want me to ask it? That seems like a lot. Let's see what it says. Seems like a lot. It definitely is. Yeah, I don't want to get into this with AI. Yeah,
it is a lot.
So, all right. So yeah, we talked about how he was just so certain, about his specific strain, right? And how special he felt. And then he's building himself up for the fall, probably, right? But then he gets into this a little bit of start to where we're going about, does hell exist? And that's where we kind of left it off. And I think that he was talking about like how a lot of modern day apologists would have decided to go for annihilation, like spiritual annihilation, as some kind of I don't know if it's a cope or just some kind of way to talk it out, hell, which I thought was interesting.
The Bible, most of what we think about hell, first off, isn't biblical. So.
Yeah, you said that last time too, that we have a lot of it from Dante's Inferno, and just some other kind of fiction imagery, right? But there is like some phrasing like pits of fire, of hell, that's in the Bible, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, but it doesn't necessarily refer to what people imagine that it is. Is possibly referring to Gehenna, which is actually
right. And Alex made a point. Alex had made a point that philosophically it actually stands on pretty good ground if you were to go from the point that if God is everything, every Lego block of the universe, then if you were to like not be within the universe, then you would be annihilated, right? So he was saying this is philosophically sound. I was like, okay, yeah, all right, the point is to me is that like basically they've come up with another idea, right? Which what is it? And they're making up some their own kind of like little version because as you learn more and you decide to apologize more, there's more to apologize for. And I think he starts to get into this in the next part of this. So I think this is where he starts talking about like some of the chinks in the armor of his faith, right? Like how some certain things started to change his worldview. And we're gonna listen and comment, and maybe I'll have a story or two that will relate, like we did last time, and then certainly I know Pastor Billy's got plenty to talk about as well. So we're both professional talkers, I guess. Mine usually comes with notes.
We are. Well, we both use microphones regularly.
Yeah, we do. We are. Yeah. So shall we get started? Yes, I will say yes.
I mean, maybe this was one of them, but when do the dominoes start to fall over for you? How old are you, and what starts to happen? Because right now you're speaking past tense. So at some point you go from not just Christian, but really involved professional Christian, as you put it, to now where you are. Where does this start?
So in my early 20s, the first couple of years out of school, I'm an engineer, civil engineer. I'm still very involved in Campus Crusade at the time. I'm not having that many, existential questions about it. If anything, I'm thinking about how I'm moving towards being a professional Christian, because my wife was still in college at the time. And so Lincoln and I had kind of, we'd been best friends since first grade, 1984. So we kind of knew what we were working towards. And the idea that we were going to develop this ministry where we got to be funny and make our comedy videos. And we were really trying to find a way to do the thing that we loved for the cause that we loved.
So it sort of started as with God in the periphery here, of like with all the video stuff, and it's all sort of directed towards, at least subtly to some degree, evangelism.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was a way to have my cake and eat it too, because I really wanted, like we are entertainers at heart. We wanted to be filmmakers. We wanted to make things that, had significance culturally. We wanted to do that from the very beginning. So we always had our minds of like on this idea that maybe we'll kind of, we can use this ministry, or we can have a ministry where we're doing these things that we love, and then maybe something that we make will be impactful enough so that we could one day, maybe we'll move to Hollywood and maybe we'll have a ministry there just through the things that we create. That was sort of the thought in the early days. So shortly after the engineering stint, go on staff with Campus Crusade. At that point, you're going to the staff training and you're taking the seminary classes and your initial, and I was always I was not like a super deep student of theology, but I would say moderately deep. And there were certain ideas that I would gravitate towards and things that I like to think about and talk about. At that same time,
so let me make
a
comment first.
Sure.
I never really thought about.
So I just want to say first, I relate to the conversation he was having there about his, I would call it his calling to this professional ministry, in the sense that, one of the things you're told at that age is find what you love and do what you love. Mm-hmm. And, my calling to become a professional Christian, as he said, it was through working with kids at camp, and my involvement in the Wesley Foundation, which is the United Methodist Campus Ministry, which was kind of my church away from home. My involvement in my home church was limited because I wasn't living in the area. But so I really relate to, where he's at in that place is, I can do what I love to do and be a part of something bigger in that. So just on a pure, just thinking about it from that very basic level there, that's a part of how a lot of people come to a place where they choose to be a professional Christian, or we would refer to it as, be in full-time ministry, whether it's musicians or educators or pastors or whatever.
I think you might have actually had a more clear calling, I think, than what he's describing here. I feel like he's maybe describing.
No.
I feel like maybe he's describing he wanted to do like acting work and like create videos and films and things like that. And if somehow that could also be a vehicle for, you know, this calling, so to speak. I think that I don't think that you had the desire to first make like videos or entertain people first. It was more help people first.
No, I had the desire to do some of the things I was doing. I had the desire to do stuff like through camping, because that was what I grew up with. That was what I was good at. It was where I excelled, was in my camping skills and things like that, and working with the kids, and all of that was a big part of my call to ministry. And it wasn't, I wasn't called immediately. My calling, my process didn't say I need to be a pastor. That was not the first or the second or maybe even the third thing. It was more of what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We have, in the United Methodist Church, we have something called the candidacy process that we go through, and you kind of interview people, and you look at other, what are the areas of ministry that you could be involved in, and in that process is where I came to the place of pastoral ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So there very much is a similarity to that. Yes, I wasn't a creative person that could do the stuff that he was doing, but of course the technology I was in college was pretty limited anyway for us. You had to be in a studio or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I wanted to comment on was the use of the word seminary. People use that word very differently in different areas of the Christian faith.
Okay.
Seminary for us United Methodist is a master's degree program. For many, it is a undergraduate thing, and for some, it's even more like an associate degree kind of a thing.
Okay.
Where they go to the quote seminary, which is a Bible college, in other words. So there's a huge difference in that because of the way you approach Bible study, and the way you approach what the purpose of your whole time there is. It's very different, and also the level of education that you're working at. So I just point that out, that when we use that, a lot of folks who are not really familiar with it hear the word seminary and they think it's all the same, and it's just not.
Sure,
it isn't.
Also, just further, there's probably many churches that their pastor or preacher that hasn't had any kind of formal education in that regard, right?
I did a wedding in my first couple. I did a wedding in my first couple of years with a man who was a Free Will Baptist, and he couldn't read.
Yeah. So, I mean, religion works in that First Amendment kind of thing, like.
That's right.
Yeah. There's not going to be really a whole lot of pushback, right?
But I think, within the church, people still don't understand that difference, but outside the church, people even understand it less most of the time.
All right.
I'm not saying that everybody outside the church doesn't, but anyway, I just want to make that comment.
Sure. With Mr. Rhett here, I think, again, we talked about it last time we talked. He talked about being a professional Christian, and I wanted to. I think he said it that way to make sure he differentiated from like an actual pastor, somebody who does the kind of work that you do. Which, by the way, if anybody is curious about a pastor's schedule, I had Billy send me his schedule just because I was like, what is your like an average week look like? And it was very filled. So we're very fortunate to have him. Thank you again, Billy. But yeah, his work was a little bit different. It was more like a recruiter in a way. And then I think he also talks about we're going to get into it actually, how he was also put to task at like maybe combating, like actually leading a strategized, coordinated arm college kids with apologia type
the four spiritual laws and things like that were very much a part of their
where you've said many times that you're not a preacher, you're not necessarily you're trying to pastor, which is like guide, which very, very Boy Scouts, which I totally like. I dig that, right?
Well, and as a Boy Scout, you learned in leadership that leadership isn't telling people what to do and they do it. It's helping them have the skill set to do what they're doing.
Yeah. All right, let's move further with Mr. Rhett and Alex.
The intersection of science and faith. I think the way that I would have described it is, I think that most scientists are not Christians. Most scientists are atheists, and they've come up with some pretty wacky ideas to try to explain the world and why people are the way that they are, why the world is the way that it is. And they're mostly just desperate attempts to explain the world without God's involvement. So that whole thing about evolution and how long the world has been here, that's probably all BS. But I didn't think about it any more deeply than that. I wasn't like a staunch young Earth creationist.
In my experience, we certainly weren't young Earth creationists. I just don't know that my parents were really interested in telling me what was what. As I said, when I first really analytically dove into the Bible after I became a member, I was very confused about how valid Genesis could actually be now that I'm actually analytically looking at it and not just from a child's eyes enjoying magic stories, about talking snakes and giant floods with boats that every animal, so like, I'm analytically looking at this and it's, there's just stuff that doesn't make sense. And I remember asking Dad about it. I think I talked about it in the previous episode, but my father is a scientist, right? So it was even more.
You were surrounded by scientists. Of all kinds.
In our community, Oak Ridge, a very science invested community, from the ground up. The schools there are that's now it's a based off of kind of a horrific event, which is dropping an atomic bomb, right? But there's a lot of scientists out in Oak Ridge doing a lot of like non-weapon related work, and my father doesn't do really weapon related work. He is involved with like uranium purity type stuff, and half-lives and things like that. I don't know. He can't tell me half of it, or maybe he can't tell me very little bit
secret.
of it. Yeah, well, but so
that's neither here nor there. To have a parent who has a security clearance in Oak Ridge is pretty normal.
Yeah. So for me, science was already baked in. Like, I just hadn't learned how to apologize for it yet. I just had never thought about it. Whereas he comes from, scientists or atheists, almost all of them. And I was like, well, not from my experience, right? My experience was a Christian family who had a father who was, I don't know if he was comfortable or not comfortable giving me some apologetic points of view, or if he just didn't have them and didn't want to deal with it. And my mom, my mom, she won't, we didn't really, she didn't really get involved with like telling me what's what. So, my grandmother in Kentucky did though, and she was very fundamental about a lot of things. So, but she was a Southern Baptist and it was different, so, and, Rhett says that he comes from like, what would be Southern Baptist, basically, he said, we tried to be non-denominational, but we were Southern Baptist. So, anyway, that's kind of
he said that about Campus Crusade, but I think he also said he came from a Baptist,
he whatever it was, his alignment with Campus Crusade and his actual church were on equal footing in his eyes.
Pretty in sync, yeah.
I didn't think about that issue in particular, but I picked up a book from an astronomer, Hugh Ross, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, and it's he has a Christian ministry that is like very anti-evolution.
That's true, Bubba.
Very pro old universe, from the standpoint of astronomy, which. Obviously, when you look at all the astronomical evidence and the speed of light and the size of the universe and all this stuff, okay, the universe has been around for probably as long as the scientists are saying. But then he went on to essentially say that, but all truth is God's truth, and this is totally compatible with the Bible. But just so you know, evolution didn't happen. He was a proponent of something called progressive creationism, which essentially was, yes, the world has been around for as long as the scientists say.
Right.
And these fossils we find are legitimate fossils that are approximately the date that they're saying they are. But God was creating new batches of creatures, special creations at different stages throughout the history of the world.
Whoa.
And then ultimately resulting in the creation.
Even Alex was like, "Oh man," you know. So like that's a special kind of version of evolution, or a different special kind of apologia. So
one of my Campus Crusade friends, his apologia was that God made all of that stuff to seem like it was that old.
Yeah, so you got the people that are the 4,000 year people, something like that.
6,000, six something.
Was it six? Is it 6,000? Yeah, and I mean, if we're going to say that God is omnipotent, right? Then I suppose.
I'm not saying that.
Well, I know, but I mean, like this is their worldview. I'm not saying
it is their worldview. Yes, absolutely.
Their worldview that this is omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence is also usually mixed in, but they don't know how to feel about that really.
Yeah.
Right, because it's
that's they're not really concerned about benevolence.
Right, or they'll find a way to apologize for bad behavior. So to get back on track, not to get too far off the topic. So Alex and Rhett, we're talking here, and Rhett is basically he's basically getting these little signs, right? So the first one is, okay, so yeah, the universe, right? But I have this other answer that I like for this other thing, since I can't believe that, but since now this one domino has fallen, here comes this next domino, right? And it's okay, well, but trust me, evolution is just God did it this way, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, that one's a little hard to believe, right? And so like it's going to work its way down is what I'm saying. Like, and I had a similar thing. This is the deconstruction part where it's like you had this first like thing you really just start saying, oh man, I don't know, right? And for me, it kind of, it was just that the stories were like, well, what, right? When I really started thinking about it, but at this point, I'm still thinking
ain't nobody living in a fish.
Yeah, I'm still thinking omnipotence though, right? Like I'm coming from omnipotence is still the thing here. You said you never had that, but for me.
So the interesting thing about that is I think that is because of the American cultural understanding, which is vastly influenced by, especially in the South, by the Baptist Church and fundamentalism.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in the Methodist Church,
right? But the omni stuff, all four of those and others, I'm sure, all seem to be the default that other Christians who are in denominations that do not teach that or vaguely teach that. It seems to be the default that people have. And so therefore it'd be natural for you to hear that on a regular basis. And I'm sure I heard it too from one or two of my pastors.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just the South. I think, any rural area really kind of, this is, you can kind of see the political divide when they went this way with it, if we were to, go the political route, right? But, less money, less educated areas, right? But this is where you're going to find the omnipotence argument.
That is a bit more new, that the rural thing was everybody kind of had these kind of teachings, because in certain areas you have the Lutheran Church is very, very effectively all over the rural areas, whereas in the South it really was the Southern Baptist Church and those branches Free Will Baptist and the Primitive Baptist, and all of those, But in other areas, you had Catholic churches in very rural areas. You don't have that as much anymore. Those have
Right.
kind of migrated back to the cities, to the larger cathedrals and stuff like that, and not really doing so much in the rural areas because they were not, it didn't relate to, it didn't seem to connect with the rural person and the rural lifestyle.
Or at least
So
in this demographic, I'd say it probably does pretty well in Mexico.
Yes, in Mexico, my experience there, which is in Puebla, which was that, so the little town we were in, Totoscac, they had a Catholic church, and they had a Pentecostal holiness fundamentalist evangelical church. And those were the two largest groups of Christians. And then there was the Methodist church in Mexico that had started through our mission work, through the clinic that we started. Somebody in our country, in our conference started some time before that. And they said, we really ought to have a church here. And so there was this small Methodist church, but there was nobody else, because there were only 600 people in the town.
Yeah. That's like my grandmother's town. I mean, it's, they've got, amazingly, I think they had 2 churches, but their town was like size 362 or something. It was,
Yeah. And I've lived in towns where there were 5 churches within a quarter of a mile in one direction of where I was at. And only, maybe even 6 or 7 churches in one place. They were little tiny things, and I mean a very small area. There was a big Baptist church down the road that was maybe a quarter mile away, and between there and in that same distance going back into the community, there were 3 or 4 more churches that were just little, almost, I wouldn't call them house churches because they weren't in somebody's house, but they had these little buildings that were no bigger than the small houses that were there. And those were not there 40 years ago.
Right.
Those were there more recently.
But nonetheless, rural areas in general are probably going to accept the omnipotence message, whether it be Catholic or Southern Baptist or Lutheran or just whatever. The omnipotence message for the people that haven't looked, I would say, or at least maybe didn't have the opportunity to look a little deeper into it, or maybe didn't want to think about it too hard. The omnipotence message is scary for, those folks. And very, it's profound, right? Like, it's like you can do anything. So 6,000-year-old Earth that actually looks like it's, billions of years old. So be it, right?
Yeah.
I said, this is fine because omnipotence just makes up for everything. The problem with omnipotence, the problem with omnipotence,
craziness of that notion.
Yeah, it creates philosophical problems, right? So
yes, yeah.
Anyway, Bubba, I would like to know about your physical science creationist POV at Tennessee Wesleyan.
Who the heck taught that?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear.
Is it just about the point of view, or was it actually a class teaching creationism?
At Wesleyan, interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe Bubba will respond on that. Let's hear what he had to say about as he's going down what I'd call the science hole.
Yeah.
Of people.
So, why?
Great question. Great question. So
hold on, let's rewind that a little bit.
God was creating new batches of creatures, special creations at different stages throughout the history of the world.
Whoa.
And then ultimately resulting in the creation of people.
So, why?
Great question. Great question. So I remember thinking as I'm reading this, I'm like, it's the first time I ever thought about there being some reconciliation between what we observe in science and my belief about the world. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't feel like a good explanation.
I've never heard of somebody. I mean, I'm sure I've met someone who probably like believes that the Earth is old and the universe is old, but maybe is suspicious of evolution. But specifically, like, well, I'm a scientist and I'm an astronomer, and there's just no way I can look at the redshifting of the galaxies and deny that the universe is 13.8 billion years old. But that evolution stuff from that other field of biology that I've probably never really seriously studied, yeah, no, that's all BS. And instead, I mean, God is just creating animals willy-nilly.
And there's animals that are getting more and more like a person before the people.
Yeah, it's like God is just sort of doing little trial runs or
Right.
something.
I mean, what does that say about God is what I was thinking.
Yeah, it gets there eventually. That is a little bit strange. I suppose
Which that would be a paradox
in the sense of like
that'd be a paradox for an omnipotent, omniscient being, right? Like, why would you need to like try it out?
Test it out.
Yeah, like let's try this one and see
I
how
know
that.
I know this will work.
Right.
like stretching out the story of Genesis over however long you needed, and animals sort of popping in on different days and stuff like this. But yeah, I mean the biggest problem for me that evolution poses to the Christian and a lot of Christians today just accept evolution. They're like, yeah, sure, humans all have a common ancestor with other animals. The biggest problem that I think it poses is the seeming like arbitrariness with which you have to say that, presuming that our apish ancestors don't get to inherit eternal life. At some point, a mother gives birth to a child, and the child is morally condemnable to hell, but also potentially has the ability to inherit eternal life, but his mother doesn't.
Right.
And what the difference is there. And maybe it's just a brute fact. Maybe God just breathed life into that particular organism, but it just seems a bit arbitrary and unfair that person's suffering will now be redeemed and it now means something. But their mothers, who is the same organism, same suffering, same lifestyle, same everything, dies like an animal. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
Unless you want to say that personhood is something which develops as well, but that gets you into a whole lot of trouble with
and so that's where I ended up going, right? Because when I didn't really buy into the progressive creationism thing, but I was so sure that evolution didn't happen. I was like, when you're raised in the Christian faith and the only exposure to the idea of evolution you've ever had has come through the filter of a Christian scientist telling you why it's not legitimate. Somebody comes into your church and they're like the evolution expert, and they're like, they make it seem
this part was a little wild to me that they have an evolution expert come into churches, right?
Yeah, never experienced that.
yeah. Again, this was a little foreign to me. Maybe I'm the special case here, though, because Oak Ridge is what Oak Ridge is. A science town. I
didn't grow up in Oak Ridge. I grew up in Carnes, which is Oak Ridge adjacent.
Yeah, I mean, you have an educated pocket right there, right, with Oak Ridge and West Knoxville. And Carnes kind of sits like in that northwest in between area.
It was TVA and Oak Ridge populated a large part of it.
The science community it was so big it had to influence the area a bit, right? But for me, evolution was like, when we heard about evolution, it just like, this is what the scientists are saying. So like it was also working like in a way like the way the religion would be working. It's like, these are what the people are saying, so we just believe it. And I was like trying to believe all of it until I was old enough to realize that they don't like fit exactly, and again, I didn't have anybody to teach me how to apologize. So for me, this happened much earlier than Rhett, because I heard the apologies much later, and I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But he's getting it like firsthand at his church. Here comes the evolution expert. That is crazy to me. So, and that's the first you've heard of it too, huh?
I've heard of people coming into churches with all kinds of things like that. It doesn't surprise me that they did such a thing. I just never experienced it.
Yeah. Okay.
And nobody's ever asked me, hey, we got this evolution expert coming. Would you like to have him come to your church? No.
Yeah. And back to Bubba's, comment on the creationist POV at Wesleyan. He said he didn't have to push it too hard. 99% of the students already believe that. And then, as a lot of these arguments are, is that, once you get to a certain point where you can just like stop, right? A lot of people will just stop and say, this is as far as I'm going with the argument. I'm just holding on to it here. I don't care what else you have to say about it. So I'm assuming that's what he means by that.
So I took an English class.
Mm-hmm.
And in my English class, we had to do a research paper. And I did my research paper in, first part of college on evolution versus creation. And honest to God, that was the first time I'd ever heard of the concept of creationism. I thought we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think you're an outlier, though.
Yeah, I thought I was just talking about, okay, here's evolution. Here's what the Bible says. Do they conflict? That kind of a thing. And as the more I got into it, and of course, I didn't have any theological background. I had been back in the church for a couple of years at that point. I started getting into research, and I'm finding out through reputable magazines that I'd heard of before. And then there's other, like there was actually so-called science that called itself creationism and taught this weird stuff that no, that's not what science looked like, is what I kept saying to myself. So, in a sense, we're both learning the same thing there at that same time for me and Rhett. But I was learning it and going, the church is weird in that regard.
Yeah.
And so my analysis was, first off, I'm a follower of Jesus, and Jesus taught in parable. Right. I just can't imagine that the people that lived 30 centuries ago could understand the biology of evolution, the astronomy of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of that were put in a Bible and put in the text or told as a story, it would be a boring, long story. And but that stories was the method of teaching, and that the purpose of the story was what mattered, not the content of the story. And so I never had any question about whether or not creation had to was in conflict. I never had any thought that creation was in conflict with the science that was real.
Sure. So, but like, you didn't, as you said, you weren't in it like I was in it, probably like Bubba was in it, where, you're getting spoon-fed that it's all real as a child, right? Like we talked about the cartoons or whatever. I'm just saying that was just a delivery method that like, this is all, Santa Claus was still real for us back then. So he's in a cartoon. Yeah. They're saying it's real. These are Jesus cartoons. It's all real. It's just real. Everything was real. My parents say it's real. Everybody says it's real. All these people are here. It's real. It's real.
See, I never had those conversations with my parents. My father was gone by the time I was 8th grade, and that wasn't really a topic that he would have ever had a conversation about. I think for him, the church was about community service more than anything, period.
Right. So then you get into, So then you get into what are the purpose of these stories? That's great. That's your, like, that's there too. Right. But if you have been taught that it's the truth, this is how it went down, and you have to say, okay, so what do you mean? Like, what did the first humans, was Adam and Eve just really, you have the apologetics starting to happen, naturally, does that mean that, it was just the first cavemen that were kind of self-aware, or, or because it certainly wasn't, from the rib, because we don't have the rib, when we look at males and females, there's not a missing rib. It's not, or whatever.
Right.
And the whole concept of throwing a rib into some dirt to create a person just sounds crazy anyway. I
also remember people actually trying to defend that men actually have one less rib.
Yeah. It's what? So, this is where the apologetics start to come, right? You have to start like saying, okay, this is clearly just some like ancient stories, right? So now you have to like, but you have to, it's just the first like thing to fall, right? Like, okay,
I get that. Yeah.
those aren't real. These are ancient stories. And it's going to put like a question for the rest of the book. Once you get to this first point where you have to make your first apology, what else is real? Right. So then you have to go, your route, which would be like, what are the messages saying? Which that was always where I went anyway, eventually. But it was a shock. It was a shock to move from believing like the magic part,
Yeah. And I guess, I don't ever remember thinking, oh, there was really this guy who got into a whale.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, that was
I don't ever remember thinking that was real.
Yeah, that's crazy to me because, like, as a kid, I'm coloring the picture of Jonah in the whale.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
And like, it's like we're paying, I'm 8, I'm 6, I'm whatever. I'm not, we're paying homage to these great biblical heroes that are real, like this is real. That's why we're all here. I didn't, as a kid, you don't understand it. But it's part of that initial, like, it's getting you hooked in, right?
Right.
But that's, this was a thing for Rhett to be like, whoa, there's a bunch of stuff that now is compromised, and it starts the dominoes.
So impossible that you walk out of that with the full affirmation of the idea that evolution definitely didn't happen. And it's a horrible explanation. It will be debunked by the scientists themselves within our lifetime. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we told ourselves, right?
Right.
And we firmly believed it. But because of this proposal, this progressive creationist idea, because the age of the universe and the age of the earth, from a geological, I've always been interested in geology, but from a geological standpoint, I was like, oh, well, this is inescapable. Like, this isn't, like, the way that Answers in Genesis has framed this issue is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's definitely disingenuous. I think they really just believe that it has to, be consistent with the Bible. And so they're just willing to just completely reshape everything that they're seeing in light of that. But I essentially was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. So then the idea of considering evolution, which just felt, I was like, am I actually about to do this? And I was like, well, I think C.S. Lewis believed in evolution. You start saying these things like, but there's a lot of Christians who are like theistic evolutionists. And okay, so maybe there's something to this. So I read Francis Collins' book, The Language of God. And the thing that I took away from that book was that, well, evolution happened as well. And he touches on it a little bit. He talks about, in that book, I think he talks about the second chromosome, the fusing of the second chromosome. I think he talks a little bit about retroviruses, and essentially, we've got the marks of the same retroviruses on our DNA that chimpanzees do. And there are just these, again,
DNA probably that was a big hit to the apologists when they really started having to, like, okay, this DNA thing seems kind of like legit. We're solving crimes with it and stuff, Yeah.
We'll give them time.
Yeah. Right.
There's no other way.
If you give them time, they'll find a verse that's. If you give them time, they'll find a verse that
it will say something about DNA.
Yeah, that will prove why DNA is similar. And again, that's just God trying to trick us or something.
Sure. Well, I mean, God told Moses to take his kid all the way up to the altar, and then like last second was like Abraham. I'm sorry, not Moses. That's my bad. Abraham to the altar. Well, listen, I am the atheist here. I'm allowed a mistake.
You are, and I was just helping.
Thank you.
Because I'll get a lot of those wrong myself too, because of names.
So Abraham, and then so what we know about God is he's a little bit of a trickster, at least the Old Testament one, so maybe that's what it is. There's a secret, there's a passage in there somewhere that gives.
And then you go back to, well, that story's not really that big a problem because, well, God knew.
Yeah, because omniscience.
Well, it doesn't make any sense.
So,
It just that doesn't make any. That never made sense to me either. I will tell you just a little side note on that particular story. Fred Craddock was the guy who wrote the book on preaching. The name of the book was Preaching, and if you ask
Fred Craddock,
if you ask anybody, certainly in Methodism or Presbyterians, Lutherans, maybe some Episcopalians, people that were in the Christian church, not the Church of Christ, but the Disciples of Christ, the United Church of Christ, and many others. If you ask them who's the guy who wrote the book on preaching, they will tell you Fred Craddock. He was very, very popular, great storyteller, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I will never preach on that text."
Interesting.
He said that is the one text he would never preach on.
So, I don't want to get too off that, but do you follow some of the teachings of this guy for your style, or who? I think my family loved, and this is not a knock on any of the other pastors over the years at Trinity, but the heyday for me was the John Farmer era.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, he was so good.
He was before me, but yeah.
Yeah, he was just really good at his craft.
John was also a very personable fella.
Yeah. I mean, honestly I couldn't tell you what his I was young, I was little.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what his core belief set is, but John Farmer was very much a likable pastor.
Yeah, I served with his daughter. Cindy, but never really around John. Although he did serve at the church I'm at now at one point.
Yeah,
he's very old and still alive.
He's still doing it, or just
no, not doing it.
Pretty old.
He's very old.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You never know. Some people are kicking.
I got a guy who's almost 90 that's still out there preaching whenever he can.
That's what I'm saying. You never know. Sometimes they get up to gusto. All right. I think I've lost.
He was asked to serve a church this year, but he couldn't do it.
Got you. Yeah. He's.
Sometimes
you just got to let it go.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get back to Rhett here.
Inexplicable data.
Right. It's like if we're not related to every other animal on Earth, well, God certainly tried to make it seem like we are.
Yeah.
And
prankster.
So then that was a huge moment for me. I remember coming home, still living in North Carolina. Again, a lot of people think that the story that is often told is that Link and I were Christians. We came to Los Angeles. We were corrupted by this sinful city, and we threw away our faith. And the reality, and I've told it many times, but it's passed over, is that all this happened when I was in North Carolina.
Right.
This happened when I was completely buckled into the Bible Belt. As tightly as you can be, surrounded by people who agree with me about all these things. With no social pressure to deviate from that at all. In fact, a lot of social pressure to stay in the fold.
Opposite.
So I was struggling a lot because I didn't have anybody to talk to about this.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Link. I talked to Link about it a little bit, and he would just kind of be like, "Oh, shit!" It felt like you're learning a lot of things that seem problematic, but I'm not going to think of. I don't want to think about this.
Yeah.
Jessie, my wife, who did come from a young Earth creationist background, that's what she was taught growing up. When I came home and I was like, "We need to talk about something," and I said, I am thoroughly convinced that evolution is true and that we are related to every other animal. I believe in common ancestry. And I just think that it is not just I sort of think it's true. It's just like my reading has led me to think that if this isn't true, then I actually can't determine what anything that's true. It's so overwhelming because I'd read additionally to that. She just starts crying because she knew what this represented.
Right.
I don't think he did
this
yet.
This was this seismic shift. And I think a lot of people that I tell this story to are like, what do you mean? But there's all these Christians that believe in evolution. Like, I can't believe that this was so significant for you. But I think the reason it was is because at that point, I realized how wrong I could be about something so fundamental.
Yeah.
And I never, ever considered that I might be wrong about something so fundamental. And then, not only was I wrong, but all of these Christian apologists who were so sure about their critiques of evolution, they had missed the boat so significantly on this that suddenly I was like, can I trust anything else they've got to say about this? So that was the first big domino.
Yeah. It's significant, like you say. I mean, you might think, well, there are Christians who believe in evolution, but it depends which way you come at it. I mean, if you're somebody who's like a scientifically minded person who comes to faith in Jesus, you're not going to abandon evolution, but you might think, okay, I can make this all work. But if you've come from the background you've come from, it's like going up to your wife and saying, you know, I just think maybe we should like live in separate houses or something. And your wife starts bawling, and someone says, "Hey, I don't really know. Some people do that. Some married couples, they live apart and stuff." It's like, yeah, but what it represents to move from where we are now and the way we were living to having this kind of question or this kind of desire indicates a direction of thought.
Yeah,
which you don't really want to entertain. Your wife, if I'm not mistaken, was a student of Bart Ehrman.
Yeah.
At Chapel Hill.
She was.
Right? And was this around this kind of time? Was she already being fed the atheist lies through her professor?
So,
do you know who Bart Ehrman is?
Not a clue, no.
Okay, so I had to look it up. He's basically a guy who is the head of the UNC I guess religious studies department, right? Religious Studies, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He started out, as a believer, right? And as it progressed, he finally got to some arguments where he just finally gave up on it, and now he's an agnostic atheist, right? Like the agnostic part being like, there's a lot of stuff he's just like, I don't know, but I don't believe it's any kind of deity, right? And he's writing a bunch of books about this stuff, and this is what they're going through, him and his wife at the time. So I had that ready just in case we needed some context. So
it's interesting that he went to Moody Bible Institute.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you were reading down here on this?
Yeah. And
what do you know about the Moody Bible Institute?
So when did he become a scholar? Because he went to Princeton. He got his MDiv from Princeton.
Yeah.
I wonder where did he get his doctoral degree? Because I'm betting to be at that role, he had to have gotten a doctoral. PhD from Princeton also.
Yeah, so he's Ivy. But yeah, so he. If you want to read,
and he did study under some well-known people. Bruce Metzger is a pretty well-known person, and it's interesting. But textual criticism is one that really does start to question a lot of things, and people who are not Christians who are not not in a place where they can handle anything that doesn't fit their already established dogma, do not like textual criticism at all.
Sure. So, Rhett's going to detail like his experience here with this.
This was undergrad, at UNC. And she, at that point, this was before we even went on staff with Campus Crusade. I mean,
Right.
there was no questioning of anything. Like we both saw Bart as the enemy, right? This guy is coming and he's just decimating the faith of Christian students. And
with a laugh,
yeah,
he comes in with that chuckle that
so
he has.
disarming. And it's funny. I haven't met Bart. I want to, because I want to be able to tell him this story. Well, the first thing that would happen is Jessie. My wife is she's very passionate and she's very smart, and so she was a great defender of the faith when she was in it, and she would challenge him, right? And she would like go up to him after class and be like, "What about this or what about that?" And then she would like come and report back, or like, "This is what he said," and I'm sure that there are many students who have continued to attempt this strategy with him over the years. At the same time, there was somebody who was working with Campus Crusade at UNC who approached a couple years later when Link and I were already beginning to do our ministry work, who approached me and Link and said, "We actually want to create some resources to counter what Bart is doing on campus, because we feel like we need to equip students better because they're going into these classes of his and having being confronted with these questions." And
that's a tall order,
like in terms of a multimedia project, to address that. So we were actually beginning to have those conversations. It never became anything. I mean,
before I get too far, but I tend to agree with you that a lot of I don't know if I would call it a failed understanding of science, or just because science is more like a set of rules. And when we're talking about what we can know. But yeah, I mean, failed understanding would be probably the source of probably, a lot of, early man's understanding, and therefore God's.
Well, also it's not even a failed understanding, certainly not a failed understanding of math or science, in the sense that I don't know where math started, but science is not that old a thing.
Yeah. I mean, math is kind of fundamental. It feels like, if you can put two things together and say 1 and 1 is 2.
I'm going to say this: math wasn't really a part of the equation there. It's really more about not having the information and skill, the process of science to have an observational view of the things that are going on in the world, such as creation and some of the other things on the big scale, but also, as he's pointing out, some of the just biological things that happen to human beings. Because some of the rules about some of the Levitical rules are all really about trying to keep people healthy, but they don't really understand how health works.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I
think that.
I think what Bubba might be trying to say, though, is that, again, we're kind of talking about rural man, and I would venture a guess that rural man was probably a lot more prevalent than, or at least very poor man was more prevalent than not, less educated man. And if math is the language of science, which I believe it to be mostly, then, if you're not really educated enough to get beyond, like, you're counting your sheep, in your field, if you don't know the language, it's hardly even going to get to science. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's still, I think maybe if I'm trying to apply what Bubba was trying to say, but yeah, they didn't. That's exactly. He's saying math and science interweave, but they didn't understand it yet. So this I kind of jive with just early man just not knowing a lot. So it's real easy to go.
Well, science, and I disagree with the statement that it's not laws. It is. There are rules in science. This is how you do it.
Sure. Yeah, but
rules. But
the
rules of observation.
Right, but if you don't have the math like language, right, like the language of math, if your understanding of math is super rudimentary, you can't even read, right? So that's going to be another.
Right.
But you're not so great at math
they
either.
Can read. They can read. They were writing these stories.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So like, it's just the early man was just very, primitive. Ultimately, that doesn't mean that they weren't capable, because I
Yes.
do believe that the science is
And he's right
correct.
about it. It's right
But
about women's health. It's absolutely right there.
yeah,
But that's all semantics, whether we get into whether it's a law or rule, whatever.
hmm
But the fact is that they didn't. This is not the way of teaching at the time.
yeah,
It
it
was
was
not to
stories were the
was
way
not
of
to
teaching.
not to
Yeah.
teach, through a textbook. It was to teach through language of story.
hmm
And there's things in stories that the way you tell a story to one person would be different than you might tell it to another.
hmm
But also there's the fact that what's your intent of telling the story. So why did the one writer, why did the one story come up about creation that was a 6-day thing, and the firmament and all of those kind of things, and another story come up about well, this guy Adam was created, and then Eve was created, and he, all of that.
Right.
Um, how did that? What was the purpose of these two separate stories? And then like textual criticism would get into one of the things. So the NIV, for instance, uses a past tense of a word to translate when it translates
what is that version again? The
a New International Version.
New International.
Uh,
Okay.
which is really very popular and was actually the Bible that passed the King James in sales the first time. So the NIV just changed a little word, a little verb, instead of is to was. And why does that matter? Well, because what they were trying to do was make sure that people understood that that second story of creation was a continuation of the first story, which it isn't.
Right.
And that was their interpretation of a they made a decision when they translated the Bible to translate that word incorrectly in order
hmm
to be able to create that univocality
So it
of the story.
comports. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because we want to make sure there's no conflict, and the fact is there is.
What? But I'm not even going to answer that.
Ironic would it be if I could dig up a video of me like criticizing Bart from 20 years ago. I kind of wish we had done
That
it
would be cool.
just so I'd have it now.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, so there was never. I think that there was, especially in those days, in the college days, there was zero curiosity
Right.
about whether or not I might be wrong.
Yeah.
That wasn't even up for debate. There was full confidence and no curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I am in a very, a very different place. I think those two things have reversed at this point in my life.
Right. Right.
Very low
He would
confidence
be
in my
terrible at his job if
perspective
if
and
it
high
hadn't.
curiosity.
What's that, Billy?
He would be terrible at his job if it hadn't reversed, because what his whole persona and the mythical good mythical morning and all of that is about is curiosity.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's the core of who he is.
yeah, I think that maybe that would be a better way for him to describe himself, even though I feel weird about trying to say this is a better way for you to describe yourself. But yeah, I think the curiosity was probably innate, but this probably just speaks to me of how powerful indoctrination into a
Well,
belief
yeah,
set can be.
I think he's talking about a specific area of his life. That in that one area of faith, he
hmm
was not curious
Sure. No, yeah,
because he
yeah, yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
absolutes.
That's what I'm saying. Like he's curious. He was an
Yeah,
engineer, for goodness sakes. To be an engineer,
yeah.
you got to have some natural curiosity about how things work.
And
So
he's a real unicorn, an engineer who's also an artist.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's just a bright guy. Credit to Rhett McLaughlin for his successes in many, many fields.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're taught not to be curious. It's in the Bible to not be curious. So
I don't know where that is, but
interesting. Let me see if I can pull just maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe
Are you talking about don't test the spirits or something like that?
Yeah, there's language like that in the Bible, and I'm probably gonna have to
First
pull.
John. Yeah, I don't think that's what that means. To be honest, I don't think it means don't be curious. And also, by the way, there's also talks about testing the spirit. So there's a both and.
Sure. Let's see, Bible verses about. So Proverbs, let's see what they got here. Well, I don't have time to read through all that. I'll have to look it up, and maybe we'll talk about it in another episode. But there are, at least in my understanding, there are passages in the Bible that could be interpreted as don't question the Father, right? That kind of thing. You know, like this knowledge is not for you to know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's a misinterpretation, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
It might be. So I unfortunately I didn't know this conversation was going to go that way.
I would also argue that there's probably a lot of Christians who still would argue that I would disagree with them too.
Christians that would argue like, no, it is better to remain ignorant about such things.
Yeah.
I would. Okay, so we're in agreement that it is at least an interpretation.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good interpretation, but yeah, I think it's.
Okay. A lot of interpretations. You and I will both agree that there's some interpretations that we both look at and it's like, hey, that's a harmful way to look at that. Right? So, that's why you're here. If there's another way to look at, specific places in the Bible where it says something like that, and you're just like, hey, well, it could also mean this, hey, pastor away, Yeah.
Sometimes I might even say it probably doesn't mean what you think it.
Well, you're the expert, so let's hear what you got to say about it. So let's go ahead and start them back. I am going to kind of try to look through some stuff while they're talking here.
Capacity for all of this stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's been happening to me over the past few years as well, and I think it's for the better. It's less entertaining and it's less fulfilling on a superficial level, because it's nice to be able to, even when you're just talking to somebody, it's nice to be able to, at dinner, when somebody asks you and you think, right, here it is, I'll lay it out, here's my beliefs and here's why I think this, and let's have a discussion about it. It's less fulfilling to sort of go, you know what, man, I've got kind of no idea, but here are some thoughts. But I think it protects yourself against the kind of spiritual crisis which you inevitably run up against when that first domino starts to fall. And for you, it was evolution. You've said before that you used to kind of evangelize against evolution without having known very much about evolution. I mean, it sounds like the moment you started reading into evolution of its own accord, you became convinced by it. How do you navigate arguing against evolution if you haven't already engaged with that primary literature? I'm really intrigued when I heard you say that on some other show or something. It's like, well, I hadn't really learned about evolution, but I used to go out and argue against it.
Yeah.
What arguments are you using?
Well, he wouldn't be the first to do that.
Great question.
What's
First
that?
of all, it was
He wouldn't be the first person to go out and argue against something they never studied.
No, he would not. Not in this case. Yeah. I mean, Charlie Kirk's out there doing it now. Right?
Yeah.
a different time.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested in these issues now can get. You could just ask ChatGPT to give you a primer on evolution, but all I had was, there was a few books, but one I remember, there was this, I can't remember the author's name, but the title was Icons of Evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of talks about the quote unquote best arguments for evolution, and he talks about why they're all corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found is that, first of all, 99% of the people that I engage with about this, where I was from and at the time, knew nothing about evolution. Even if they were like, yeah, I agree with that because that's what the scientists say.
Yeah.
But then you're like, describe the mechanism of evolution.
It's like we come from monkeys, right?
Well, I had read enough to say things like, okay, so you're saying that the primary raw material of evolution and through natural selection are genetic mutations. So give me an example of a beneficial mutation. And at best, your beneficial mutation just causes a change in color. But give me an example of a new species.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
That stare is quite
right.
It's quite intimidating. Suddenly I'm like, I'm thinking, is evolution true? I don't know.
Right.
Man, I don't know, man.
And so I just had those back pocket, and then I would say things like, take for instance, if we took all you have this concept that you put organisms into different environments and they suddenly become, they adapt to different environments.
Mm-hmm.
But what if we were to take all of the dogs in the world and put them out into the wild? What would happen? We would have a convergence to a type of canine that could survive in the wild. And it wouldn't be my little poodle, and it wouldn't be the Great Dane. It wouldn't be these extravagant dogs that we have created.
Wouldn't be your dog either.
Right. No. But this, if you're charismatic enough, and you're not really wanting to look further into this is a good enough, explanation. I mean, for a lot of folks, they just stop right here.
So when I was at Luminary out in Roane County, the pastor before me, they had started a contemporary worship service. So they had all the technology, they had screens and computers that controlled the screen and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so he went and bought all this. You can go out there and buy discs with, and now of course you could download it all. You pay for, probably today you'd buy a subscription to this. We produce little videos for you to use in your sermon. And somebody in my church was trying to encourage me to use those because they were a resource that was available. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something in there I could use occasionally. But it always seemed like forcing something into a sermon that wasn't connected to me in the first place. And so it never felt good. But then I was watching some of these and I was like, okay, there was this one video that just stood out among them all. And at the end of watching that video, I never had to watch another one. It showed like cans of paint being spilt over the edge of a table, and there was a canvas down below, and this painting of the Mona Lisa or some painting appeared.
Oh yeah. This is the order out of chaos argument. Yeah
exactly. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, you've got to be kidding me that you want me to show a video. And keep in mind, the person who was trying to encourage me to show these videos was an ecologist.
Right. The quickest way to kind of debunk that little, well, I mean, there's quite a few ways, but I mean, just to kind of like put a kink, if somebody comes with the, a bunch of paint cans pours and it just pours the Mona Lisa, like this is the, from chaos order argument. Right. And, what I would argue back is that while you are finding beauty, right, in, I don't know what you would call God's creation, I think the scientist still sees chaos, right? And, he's talking about like mutations, like name one mutation that's beneficial. I mean, you could probably easily.
I think you're misinterpreting what they meant in that video that I was talking about. It wasn't that this chaos created beauty. It was, this is so ridiculous that it would never happen. But this is what they were trying to debunk evolution by saying. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. No, I'm not. I know exactly what this argument is. Yeah, they're saying they're saying that it would happen.
There's no way this could happen.
this is in order for like human existence to happen, you know, the beauty of it and the symmetry of it and the, you know, all this stuff, it would be like paint cans, all this stuff pouring together and then creating something as complex and intricate as the Mona Lisa. Like this just can't happen, right? That's that's exactly. Totally their argument.
It's the absurdity of it all. Yeah. By the way, I heard of a theory that I think it was what's the cosmologist, the one who, you know, the one that took away Pluto,
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I saw something he was doing, and they were talking about a concept that I'd never heard of before, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was if you took an infinite number of monkeys, an infinite number of typewriters, and you gave them an infinite amount of time, and they pecked on keyboards, eventually they would produce Shakespeare.
Sure. Yeah, we're down the infinity hole now, right?
Right. And it's a good way to look at things and say, well, yeah, anything's possible. But there was a whole nother reason for that argument being used in that particular situation. But obviously a monkey isn't going to produce Shakespeare, but there's a lot of stuff that happened between there.
Yeah. The infinity argument is a fun one in general, you know?
It's all unprovable
it's just, it's just a fun. Okay. So you're familiar with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
A little bit. Yeah. 42.
Yeah. 42 is the answer to the life, universe, and everything. But the quest that they go through for the entire book series is to find the question, right?
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So the fun part about
my sister's a big fan.
Well, that would make sense. If the listeners have been following and you know that Billy's sister is an atheist, it would make sense that she is a big fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I highly suggest it, by the way. I really do. If anybody is looking for just a funny read that really wants to play on these big concepts and make comedy out of it, right? But the thing about infinity is anything can, with the concept of infinity, supposedly anything can happen, right? So with random chance, supposedly you could have like there's a part in the book series where nobody buys anything anymore because time travel is possible, and so they just go to a place in time where a planet of mattresses exists. So nobody actually builds mattresses. There's just these planets where these mattresses live, and people go kill. Yeah, they go kill the mattress to get a mattress.
Kill the mattress. Kill the mattress.
I mean, but infinity. Sorry. The whole concept of infinity, and then like random chance, like that's not really what we're talking about, right?
No, it's not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when we're talking about something as slow moving as evolution, and how genetic mutations work. Listen, not all genetic mutations are beneficial. I'd say most of them are not.
And many of them are actually detrimental.
Yeah. And then there's also like sort of artificial, like means of evolution, right? So, like it's not survival of the fittest, it's just survival of the most attractive in some ways. Like, humans are getting taller, and it's just like, in the United States, but it's just because socially taller people are, they get a little bit more play, apparently.
Yes, and you would think that with the technology and the machinery and the all of that we have, where the things that made human beings more successful in times of not having all of that would not necessarily be the things that continue in growth. So yet we're still taller, we're still bigger, we're still all of those things.
Right.
Even though we can get in a car and drive.
Survival of the fittest just means, did you procreate?
Yeah, that's right.
It really honestly just kind of means that,
And then also there is crossbreeding that leads to changes that are not exactly
I mean,
mutations.
well, there's all kinds of ways to get, to
That's how you
anyway,
get
but
them. That's how you get them dogs.
yeah, that's how you get them dogs, and then also, it it just kind of like shows like Rhett's argument is kind of just silly, right? And he knows it now, right? But like again, if you're just popping this stuff off, it sounds smart. If you're not really wanting to look into it too hard, if you already got the answer and you're seeking the question, which is one of the funny things about, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is because they've got the answer now. They're trying to find the question, which, by the way, in the book, the Earth was actually the computer that was calculating the question to the answer 42. And supposedly the way the book starts is a small child on this planet comes up with the question and was about to unleash it on the universe, but the Vogons needed to clear out the Earth for a intergalactic superhighway, so they just bulldozed it so the highway could be built.
Yeah,
but it's just
I saw the movie, but I didn't pay attention.
Yeah, you should, man. That's boy, it's funny. It's good stuff. Don't forget your towel. All right, so let's take a quick. Yeah, Bubba for a second wanted to get on like Adam and Eve and like incest and like I don't even want to go down that road.
Yeah, that's just being too literalist on the story in the first place.
Yeah, I mean like,
but his last statement was good. Human minds have a harder time understanding the amount of time that evolution took. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and we can't live through like we can't see like a species like evolve
that's right.
like in real time through natural forces. We'd have to artificially do it somehow in the first place, and it'd probably be at the bacterial level for the most easy way.
And yet we can sit and watch them all disappear.
Yeah. So yeah. All right, let's keep going with the fellas here.
Artificial selection. It would be the one that
artificial selection
adapts to the environment, and that would probably look like a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
End of story. Evolution doesn't happen. And most people who don't know anything about it are like, oh, okay, I guess it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's easy enough to do when somebody really, really just doesn't know. Because I think most people are at that position where they kind of know that evolution is this thing and it's got something to do with genetics and environment selection, but all you need is like one good counterexample or question that can't be answered, along with that confidence.
Yeah.
And those eyebrows.
Yeah, the eyebrows are key.
The eyebrows and the
He's got some good eyebrows.
And there's something about the fact that you're doing this kind of professionally as well. Like if they know, oh, this is a guy who's part of this organization and whatnot, they're probably thinking, even if I had an answer, he'll have heard it because he does this every day.
Right,
and so like there's just something about that confidence which is going to be quite off-putting for people. But presumably those questions start to get answered for you by the reading that you're doing. And was it, I mean, you said it was Francis Collins' book. Is there a moment where you're reading it and like your mind goes to those apologetical arguments that you make and you're like, oh, that doesn't work anymore.
I'm like, this, there's not an explanation for this. And of course, you can do that. You can, every single one of these things, there's a page on the Answers in Genesis website for everything that we could talk about related to evolution. So they've got their perspective on the second chromosome and the fusing of that chromosome. Yeah. They've got their perspective on these retroviruses. And I think I was getting to a place where I no longer, I would essentially, I read their responses and I was just like, this can't be right. Like they have to be wrong about this. Like this is not a good faith argument. This is not a good faith answer.
Yeah.
And that's when it started dawning on me that, okay, I began to notice a pattern, and I think maybe I didn't even realize I was noticing a pattern yet, but this is the pattern that started then and then propagated itself throughout my entire deconstruction. And that is there's a type of answer that someone gives when their allegiance is to the truth that they need to be true. And there's a type of answer that people who are actually interested in the truth give. And what I kept finding is that Christian apologetics, really consists of people who are like, well, the truth cannot be questioned. The truth, we've predetermined that this is true. And now we've got to find a way to buttress that truth. And there's a tenor to those arguments that they don't hold up very well under scrutiny. When you get the answer to the answer to the answer to the answer, you just keep finding it. Like, it just seems like these people seem to be interested in what actually happened, and these people seem to be interested in the truth that they hope to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge flip for me, because again, as a Christian, what I thought is, we have the truth. They have the desperate attempt to be anti-God, right? We were taught that these evolutionists, these professors who are teaching this kind of stuff, like they're sinful, they're deceived. They desperately don't want God to exist. So therefore, they got to come up with these ideas in order to explain them away.
Mm.
But when you're like,
so these are the people that I probably am the most frustrated with.
Yeah.
Right. Like the people that, like, you have, you have absolute reason to, you're trying to make it so, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I think for me, it's always going to be more like you got to come to this stuff on your own terms.
Yeah. As he was saying that, I was thinking of two things. One, I've told you I've been watching Dan McLaughlin, and it's very interesting to me. What's driving me nuts about it is these people that he's responding to are all the things that Rhett's talking about. Is these apologists who are disingenuine in the way they present their arguments of things that come across exactly as he's describing, as somebody who's got the predisposed notion of idea that this is exactly what I'm trying to prove, and so no matter how I
has
come
the
about
answer
it,
is seeking the question, right?
yeah, exactly. But they're only seeking the question they already know the answer to, and they got to make sure that you come to the same question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bizarre to me to listen to some of these, and some of them are just downright, just bizarre, just nuts. Just I don't understand why people pay attention to that.
So let's say you have a member of your church, and they come in, with some, like, let's say they've seen this video, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they've seen a video, maybe not this video. Let's say just any, a Professor Dave video on evolution or flat Earth theory, or just things like that. And they come in with some apologetics. What is your take? How do you handle that?
So the ones that I get the most about are the rapture people.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Rhett hasn't even gotten to that stuff,
Does he even get to it in this? Maybe
I don't remember. I think he really spends more time on, the Old Testament doesn't make sense to me. And by the time he gets to New Testament stuff, he's already gone from.
Yeah, right.
But so what I get is, for instance, I think I told you I had a lady in my church not too long ago ask me, do you think Revelation is predicting today's times? And my answer was no. It just isn't. That's not what the purpose of that story is. It wasn't intended to be that way.
Right. You said in the past it's just like Nero in Rome.
Yeah, the mark of the beast is Nero, and they always refer to all these folks. They refer to the Antichrist, and I'm like, have you ever read the Bible? Because the Antichrist is never once mentioned in that book, not one time. It's only mentioned, that word is only mentioned a couple of times in 1 John. It's nowhere else in the Bible. And so this lady asked me this question, and then she left the Bible study because it was time to close the Bible study, and she never came back to church. I had another lady in the church and another.
So she wanted it to be the
community.
rapture time.
She wanted it to say Israel is under attack, and that means the end times are coming.
But she was unhappy that it wasn't that, and you
she was
confirmed
unhappy
it
that
the wrong
I
way.
wasn't teaching the Bible. You know, as
Okay.
far as she was concerned, I wasn't teaching the Bible.
You weren't the expert anymore.
She had a predisposed idea of what that meant, what that book meant. And we weren't even there to study Revelation, by the way. But we were talking about the word Antichrist, and it was at the beginning of our study. And I said, well, you know, we're going to have that word, and we're find it only here in this place. And she brought up Revelation and all that. But and another lady was talking about the rapture, and she said, well, what do you say about this verse here? And I said, well, you know, first off, I'd have to really look at that verse that you're talking about and look at it in the context of what it's being said to understand what it really means. And I'm not familiar with it right now. I wasn't prepared to have a debate on that particular subject because, again, we were just talking about. And that woman went down the road to another church where that guy thought the same thing I did. But so my point there is that.
So what did they go to the third church?
No,
until they get to the church that they want.
No, they're still there. They like him, and it's also funny that particular lady is a huge supporter of Donald Trump, and one of her big arguments was about people that were illegally voting. You know, them aliens that were illegally voting. Well, she actually isn't even sure if she's a citizen because she was born in Canada and there was a whole paperwork thing and whatever else. So it's very possible she's not even a citizen, but she votes.
Well, you know.
I'm
guessing complexionally she feels like she's a citizen.
That's exactly right. But the answer to your question, which was how do you approach those people that come with these kind of things, is I can only be honest with them. I can only be honest and say, you know, I don't see it that way. I don't interpret it the way you're doing it. And if you want to have a conversation about what that is, why that is, then we can do that. But to be fair with you, I would rather have if it's something that I'm not that familiar with, I would say I would rather have a little bit of time to look at it and you know, refamiliarize myself with it or even learn a little more about it. But let's look at it. But I will tell you, I rarely ever get that chance. People tend to, if you don't already accept their dogma, then they're not looking. They're looking for an out already.
Shouldn't it be the other way around?
You would think.
Like they're coming to you with questions,
right? But they already have the answers.
Yeah. Again,
one woman.
These are people with answers seeking questions, right?
That's right. I had one woman come to me when I was in Roane County, and she stayed. She didn't leave, but she came and she said, "I have a few questions. I need to know to determine whether my pastor is mature enough a Christian to be my pastor." And you can guess what those questions were. How do you feel about homosexuality? How do you feel about abortion?
So they said mature?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether I was a mature enough Christian, because only a mature Christian could understand the answers that she needed to have.
And I'm assuming this person fell on the hateful side of those questions.
Yeah, she was. She interestingly, she wasn't. I don't know that she was raised Christian, but she started traveling at some point, and she was listening to a lot of AM radio on her travels in the 70s. And so she was sort of a King James only person, but the only other option for a Bible to be used was the NIV, because some radio preacher in the middle of Arizona told her, this is the Bible you need to get to study with. And she's one of the two women that were King James only people that also carried an NIV. So again, if you come at with your dogma and you're wanting, all they're really wanting is proof that their dogma, that you support their dogma.
Right.
And some of them like, well, how long have you been a United Methodist? Because that's never been something you've heard. Even from the most conservative of United Methodists, I don't think you've heard that.
Sure. Yeah.
Unless they were a local pastor who was just filling a spot.
I don't think they know about how many different denominations there are. Sorry, I'm making a joke. Yeah, they just want to believe that it's all the same. Like, my dogma must be it, so my preacher must believe it. They probably didn't have any, it might have been their church is the one that was closest, or
and honestly, so one of the things that we talked about last week, and you and Bubba, I think, has mentioned this idea that there's this concept y'all have that the only reason somebody would choose to be a Christian is because of the promise of an afterlife, because of the promise of what would happen later. And I would argue that I understand why you say that, and I think that I'm going to answer that from a church point of view, not necessarily a faith point of view. I think that the biggest reason people become members of churches, become a part of a church, is because they need to belong to something. We all have a need to belong.
Mm-hmm.
Even the most reclusive of people wants to belong to something. And it may be especially in the internet world, you can be a recluse and be connected to people who are recluses through the internet. But I think there's a really big, at least in my experience, what brings people to the church more than anything else is a need to belong, a need to be a part of something. And I think faith is a big part of that. But I think that is at the root of humanity, that we need to belong. And I think that's true whether you're a Christian or not. I don't think it has to do with, like I said, I think that doesn't necessarily have to do with faith, but what people choose to become a part of may have to do with faith.
Okay. I agree with your statement, but I don't think that you can just like take out the promise of heaven and hell with this kind of like thought process. So I think when you have beliefs of like, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that I think a lot of folks just want to really believe that their people will be there for them in the afterlife.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think people. I think today, the concept of hell is less important to people than it used to be.
Sure.
I think you may be right about the concept of heaven in some form, exactly the form you described, which is.
But when you say community, these folks aren't joining like the local volleyball club.
That's right.
Are there volleyball
There is
clubs?
a different element.
Right.
But people join those things. They join the pickleball thing and all that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like the pickleball club, like there's in Knoxville here, there's a kickball club. That's
right. There's in DC too.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like this, and you can get community from this, but these people are seeking
Renaissance fairs.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of interests that people can, especially in the day of the internet, where you can like find your people without even meeting them.
Yeah, I don't argue with that. But I think that when it comes to faith, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the end of that. For many Christians in my world, it is really more faith in Christ, following Jesus has more to do with in the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus says the kingdom of God is at hand. It isn't a reference to heaven. It's saying we need to create that kingdom on earth. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean, by the way, please don't interpret that as this Christian nationalism stuff we're talking about, because
Well, interpretation
there's
is,
nothing further.
always the problem.
Yeah,
It seems like with this stuff.
nothing further from that, because nothing that Jesus is talking about means that kind of thing based on the stories of Jesus. What it means is, to me and to the people that I know that think about that way, is that we need to do the best we can
Mm-hmm.
to promote love, community, wellness. That's what it is to be faithful to God. Is to I'm going to use some terms for you to put that energy back into the world.
Right. Okay.
That sounds very new age.
Maybe,
in some way.
listen, I listen, I jive with all of that, right? Like, I'm, again, our mission statement here is to be more like how the farmers and the cowhands can be friends about it, and for me, if it's a supernatural way that you get to that message, that's what I'm all about, right? Whatever, it's fine. You can do it. But to push a little bit back on the whole community thing, you started with, like, this is built around a community. Yeah, but it's around a community that I think there's confidence. Like, if you're really worried that you're going to see your people at the end, you're really worried about the afterlife in this way, and like you want to get right, so you make sure your afterlife is the way you want it to be. Like, this is an interesting motivation in the first place, right? Like, you instead of, as your definition is to, like, basically to do good in the world, right? Which I'm with, right? These people are looking for a reward, right? And they also want to be able to believe in a reward. And if they go into a community where it's a community of people who believe in the reward, it becomes more real.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that there aren't Christians, and probably even most Christians, that believe what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying there is that
the
is
alternative,
not the only reason.
Which you and I both like jive with, is go and do good in the world, right? Like,
yeah, and
lead with
the
empathy and
motivation
tolerance.
The motivation for that may be different.
Right.
The motivation for a Christian to say, I want to go do good in the world, is for those that I'm talking about that are really more thinking about rather than sometime in the future. It is that, because there are Christians out there that say we shouldn't worry about earth, we shouldn't worry about people on earth now, because it's really about getting right with God for ourselves so that we get to heaven.
Yeah.
And we don't need to worry about this, because when they get there, it's all going to be great. But what I'm saying, for me and for many, it is that as we work on our faith, we're motivated by that faith to offer love to our neighbor. We're
Mm-hmm.
motivated by the scripture that we read to follow Matthew 25, which I know you're familiar with.
Yes, yeah.
And those things are more important to us than, am I going to see my people in the end? That reward thing, the reward is already there. We don't have to wait for it.
Right.
I'm guessing you find it rewarding to coach basketball.
We took a lot of L's, Billy. No, we had fun. We had fun coaching. I had fun coaching the kids, and trying to teach them stuff.
You didn't see how bad my under 13 girls soccer team was with all the Hispanic kids.
Oh yeah, they were bad.
Oh, they were terrible. We got across midfield a few times.
Interesting. Yeah. So I've had my ups and downs with coaching basketball, for sure, especially youth.
And first one was soccer.
But at the rec level, and kids today are a little bit different. They come in with more resources to be good, but have put
Less motivation.
Put in less reps. I mean, motivation, I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be kids that want to play, you know.
Yeah.
But like for me, it was just a part. It was a part of life. I played basketball every day after school, you know.
I played a lot of basketball in my youth and in college, but never, ever once on an actual team. So,
I mean, coaching kids, teaching kids, you know, music stuff. It's rewarding.
There's reward in
there's reward in the action. You know, Ed has joined the chat now at the very end. He telling me that the YouTube chat's not working again for whatever reason. But last time I tried to fix it, it basically became a rap song with a lot of reverb.
But it was fun.
It was fun for a second.
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
But you know, the reward is my brain giving me a little dopamine for whatever it is. I don't know, you know. But for me, if we're just looking at it for what it is, you know, there's reward in teaching not just children, but just anybody. You know, if you got some expertise and in that way, also practicing kindness and empathy and tolerance. You know, following Matthew 25:35, even as an atheist. There's rewards here, you know.
Yeah, and I would also say, so one of the places I get a great deal of reward teaching is when the people in my group, my class, my whatever, ask interesting questions that don't just, you know, the question that Bubba has a very good understanding on, that the woman asked about Revelation. That's not an interesting question in the first place. The question that another lady in the class asked about, well, we were studying the story of John the Baptist's birth and all that, and she asked some questions that really challenged the dogmas that everybody in the room had accepted all their lives. And that always is more rewarding to me. And I tell her sometimes, I say, Joanne, I really like the questions you ask. So, you know, like I say, there's reward in seeing people grow. There's reward in being a part of that. But there's also reward in the guy that I told you about that was taken to the hospital to have his procedure done that he backed out of because he was too afraid, and being able to talk to him about what was his fear and where did that come from, and get to the root of that on the way home, and now trying to help him get to the place where he can go back and do that procedure. There's reward in that process, in caring for somebody, and that's very important to me.
Sure. I mean, I live in the same neighborhood in terms of how I feel about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when we talk about what it is one of the things that you talked to me about when we first started this was, how do we reach these people that have this machismo about what it is to be a man?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, both of us would say, well, what it is to be a man isn't defined by how many muscles you have and how many people you've kicked sand in their face. It's how you have lived your life that lifts up other people.
Maybe how many people you've picked up after they had sand kicked in their face. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to.
Did you see Bubba's comment there? All the cool kids hang out in the Facebook chat.
That's right. Well,
sorry, Ed.
Sorry, Ed. Yeah, man. I don't know. I mean, I'll take a look at it, but I mean, the chat's up and running. Let's see, chat. Yeah, it's there. I don't know. Sorry, Ed. I don't know what's up, man.
Chat.
Yeah. So, anyway, I guess let's take a look. I think that's a pretty good place to start. You know, he's going to go into a pretty heavy area in our next discussion, talking about like the resurrection and you know, because he'll even say it like all these things eventually they start going toward his relationship with his personal relationship with Jesus, and how he would see what Jesus would be. And it's that part of the discussion is it's heavy, when you're really giving it up, like when you're really giving it up.
I think it's very interesting. I think Rhett is a really good person to have this conversation about, and follow him and have your conversation, because first off, he's very thoughtful, he's smart, and he has a lot of other stuff out there, and he's a likable guy, and he doesn't come across as judgmental to anybody who doesn't agree with him. That he's
yeah, he seems like a cool guy to hang out with. I mean, just he's not gonna. Now, but I will tell you this: the Rhett he described, the very overconfident one.
Yeah, that's not the person that.
I mean, I might have liked him, but I would have pushed him to the limit.
Yeah,
that kind of guy.
I would have been bothered by him for sure.
Yeah, and you live in the more in that sphere than me. I did pull up, by the way, and so Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. I'm probably going to have to look into these a little more, just to be fair. I mean, that's the first one that popped up. No, we did not discuss Jordan Peterson at all.
Was that who JP is?
Yeah, so there's you may have seen a couple of these on YouTube since you've been dealing with me, and maybe who knows what your algorithm might be pulling up.
Messing up my algorithm, are you?
Yeah, man. Sorry about that. There's a Jubilee debate where they take like 20 people, and have them go and get to one person. There's like a clock, and people can vote the person who's talking to them out, and it's just it's more show than anything. And they had 20 atheists versus Jordan Peterson, and so Ed and I have been discussing that one a bit. Which Jordan Peterson?
Give me that Proverbs verse again.
3:5. But that's just one of them. I've got some other ones. I don't want to like go too far into it, because I mean, like, I don't have the context of before and after. This is just something I pulled off, the internet real fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's something I've looked into before, right? Where it's like, the Bible says, don't question the Bible, right? It's a circular thing,
Again, Proverbs is just a list of sayings, so it doesn't really.
Interpretation is always going to, play into this, kind of thing, and
what is the context of why they would say that matters too,
and who would put that story in the Bible as the collection of stories, and like maybe if this was something that was even supposed to be, who knows? I don't have the answers to that, but there is a way to interpret that. Also, that's
what I was wondering was. I'm looking at the New Revised Standard Version updated edition, and I was curious if it was drastically different from whatever you found looking it up in your own. And it's trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your. and there's kind of a footnote, but this is something I have to learn about the updated edition because they've got these things that show up and they're not footnotes.
Mm-hmm. So there's other ones too, but I need before we really go down that rabbit hole of if the Bible does tell you to stay ignorant, because that's the more better way to be. I'll need to really
in
look into that a
Methodism
little
we speak of the Wesleyan quadrilateral, which is scripture, tradition, experience, and reason. So
reason.
Yeah, reason.
Yeah. Okay, well, Billy, I thank you again for your time and all your expertise.
I'm just glad to be in a warm place tonight.
Hopefully,
we'll get the camera fit. We'll hit this camera thing solved. I don't know why. I think my cord is just kinked, and I can't.
It's okay. Ed made a beautiful picture with you by just simply asking for it to an AI. He's like, here's a picture of these two guys make the and the AI made it like in a second. It's like a word calculator.
Did it point out our immense tallness?
No, I mean, it just has you with some. Have you not seen it yet?
No, I haven't. Hey, the Pirates came back.
Oh, the Pirates came back. Nice. You're having a good one.
They were down 6-0. It's 6-6.
So where are they at now in the standings? A couple weeks ago, the Reds were playing the Pirates, and the Pirates
were terribly last.
Yeah, the Pirates won that game, and we were about to have, and we didn't do that show. I think that was the one where you were in Oak Ridge.
Yeah, that's right. So I was actually in Knoxville at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you were out, right?
Yeah, staying in Oak Ridge at night.
But
yeah, they're in last place solidly. So yeah, I appreciate the time we've had today. This is nice.
I hope that these discussions live in that same realm as the lady who challenges you in your Sunday school class, Joanne. You say Joanne?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we give you a good challenge from time to time.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I hope I do the same for you.
Oh man, obviously. So fun.
What I tell people when I teach a Bible study is, I hope we're learning from each other, and I think that's where you and I come on this too.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
he says the AI pic is very tall and looming.
Yeah. You have a purple shirt on.
Of course I do, and I don't today, so that's why the camera's not working.
Yeah, and
by the way, it's not the camera that's bad; it's the ATEM Mini.
I found the video you posted, and I ended up posting in our group chat on Master at Atheist.
So the reason I posted that was I just preached a sermon on Lydia, and we're studying that chapter, and I thought this person did a really nice job of pointing out some of what I was pointing out, which is that character is somebody who was not the norm, and it's profound that she's talked about in the Bible as a woman who was a woman of means, who had access to power and wealth, the people of power and wealth, and then also had was the head of her household.
Right. So in one essence, it's a feminist example in the Bible. Right.
It breaks the mold. It breaks the mold. And also, people always want to, so many fundamentalists want to argue, Paul said this is why women shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like,
was she rich?
No, she sold purple cloth. And so she sold something that only the wealthiest people could buy.
Yeah, you mentioned it mentioned that like she didn't collect the mucus though.
Right. She didn't make the purple. She just made the cloth, sold the cloth.
Right.
But the fact is that if you sell to the wealthiest, you're going to have some.
You're going to.
and you have access to them.
She made it through the eye of the needle.
It's a good question. I don't think she's super rich, no, but
not that rich.
The fact is that if you want to argue that Paul speaks about women not being pastors and all that stuff, then you can't argue that, because Paul, according to this story, made a woman the pastor of the church in Philippi.
Yeah. I was doing the edits of one of our videos. I mean, they take like 5 hours to do. And I had to weed through our entire free will conversation. I had to take most of it out. But at the end, we were talking about, Pope Francis, and how attitudinally he was good, but like still wasn't allowing ladies in the clergy. Right?
Yeah.
I wonder how this new Pope will see it.
He's been interesting so far. Not that I paid that much attention to the Pope, but I see more because of Facebook and stuff.
And he's American, so he's going to have a little bit more.
He is both North and South American.
Yeah. So, all right, well, folks, we're going to turn off the stream, and Bubba, thanks for chiming in and giving us a couple things to think about, and hopefully Ed will get in there, in the YouTube chat. I don't know what happened. He'll call me and tell me tomorrow what I messed up.
That's good. I don't have any answers.
Well, and then we'll figure out what's going on with Billy's camera. Thank goodness Ed did make us the cartoon face of you, because that was helpful.
I'm gonna take my ATEM Mini to the church and see if I plug in the other power source and prove that it's the power source, and if it is, I'll get a new one. So that should be easy.
Right on. All right, well, folks, we'll catch y'all next time.
All right.